Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Elizabeth Wernberg. Thank you so much for choosing to be here with me today. Today, we are talking about the difference between validation and support. Now, I just want to put a disclaimer for any haters out there. Obviously, of course, there is some overlap between these two terms. Obviously, of course, some of the concepts I'm talking about are going to overlap, but this is just when we're looking at more nuanced ways of how we go about our lives and how we look for who we connect with and how we connect with them in our life. This is just like to think about it a little more in that way. So of course, there's some nuance here. Of course, these terms overlap with each other, but just for the sake of the video, we're going to kind of break it down into validation versus support. Okay, so validation, just very simply, validation is more when you are looking for something outside of you to affirm a truth that's inside of you. And then support is just from the very basic concept that as humans, we are an interconnected species. And so we do need support in our lives, no matter what we're going through, if we feel good, if we feel bad, if we're going through a hard time, if we're going through an easy time. So we always need support. And then sometimes we can need validation depending on the circumstances we've gone through, depending on if we have trauma around certain things, depending on if our childhood, it was never accessible to us in certain ways before. So we're not saying that, you're not going to need validation when you, especially if you're healing a deep wound or coming to terms with the deep part of your identity, or maybe part of you that you didn't have to deal with before. But what we want to look at today is the difference between living off people's validation and having like a healthy amount of support in your life. So for example, for validation, once you are in a place where you feel proud of yourself, you feel good, you can kind of hear your intuition, you've done some of that inner work, validation is going to be more like just between you and your higher power. It's kind of like looking at it as like permission. Am I allowed to be like this? Am I allowed to want this thing? Am I allowed to want to do this? And then support would be more of something like, this is what I'm doing. And then your friends or people who love you, therapists, people who specialize in this, whoever's in your network, say like, okay, cool, we support you. Like, this is what's going on. Because again, we are an interconnected species. It is important for us to know that we do have people who are there to, kind of cheer us on. It feels good to cheer us on when we're doing something or when we make a decision or when we create something. But the difference is that if someone doesn't support you, you don't feel unvalidated. A lot of times when we've hit part of our core wounding, or we hit something inside of us that is not healed yet, that's when if we haven't learned how to self-soothe that part of us yet, then that's when we'll look externally and be like, I need you to validate me. I need you to validate me. I need you to validate me. And sometimes, again, this is where the lines get kind of crossed. But for example, if you are waiting for someone's words to validate you, then it's not going to be enough, because you need to create that validation within yourself and have it from your higher power and from like that deep, quiet inner voice of you, your intuition and your connection with spirit, with God, with whatever you call it. You need to cultivate that within yourself before you can have that reflected back to you externally. There are ways, of course, to go about this in a way that's not super healthy. That's like, some of the very simplified versions of manifesting and things. But a lot of people tell you, even if you master manifesting, sometimes if you aren't dealing with your internal core wounding, then you can manifest all you want, but it's not gonna be enough because you're not gonna have dealt with that internal validation that's missing. And so when we think about internal validation, we want to think about, okay, if I knew I didn't have any shame, if I knew I was completely safe, if I knew I didn't need to do anything to be loved or be worthy of anything, what would I validate within myself? And so this is where you want to look at it, like, how am I playing small? How do I believe I can't be how I want to be? What are the lies I'm telling myself about who I know I am in my heart, but I'm not letting myself do that? And of course, this is not like an overnight thing. You're not going to watch this video and get it. Maybe you will, that would be great. But, this is for a lot of people, when we shift that validation from looking at it to something outside of us to something inside of us we can cultivate, that's like a process, and it's going to take baby steps. It's going to take small things, but you really need to look at, am I waiting for someone outside of me to either like tell me it's okay to do this so then I feel okay, Or am I, someone shamed me because they weren't healthy, could be from your childhood, could be from yesterday, could be from whatever. And so I'm holding on to that, and I've internalized that story, and I'm using that to either validate or invalidate myself, instead of being like, okay, if this is true for me and I've done my work to clean up my side of the street, so I know I'm not using this to fill an ego gap, I'm not using this to make excuses for something, right? If I'm really doing this from the pure intentions of my heart, and this is what I feel is right in my soul, then if that's my truth, then why do I feel like I need to look outside of myself to validate myself? Okay, so when we think about validation, again, we need to think about, if you are living for someone's approval, then you're going to die by their denial, is basically what it comes down to with validation. So again, of course, this might be a slow process, especially if it's a deep wound, especially if it's a soul wound, especially if it's a wound you've been carrying for a long time. But you want to look at the ways that you might be giving your power away by waiting for someone to tell you or show you or whatever that this is what you need to be doing. And again, this is where it gets a little tricky, because with validation, you could know it's in your heart, and then maybe the support you need is seeing like, okay, look, this person is living their life in this certain way, so I know that that's the right thing for me. So it's more of like affirming what you know in your heart to be true and what you know you want your life to be like, instead of being like, oh, I can't be like this because I never saw it this other way before. So again, it's a slippery slope, and something they do overlap. But with validation, that's basically, think about feeling really disempowered, and think about really asking something outside of you to be in control of if you are allowed to do something in your life, basically, is what validation is. And when you feel really stuck, really unsure how to move that, that's where you can just tune into yourself, just do some breathing, some grounding, and just ask your higher power to validate you. Ask to get validation from the eternal source that you know exists, and you know that if there's a desire in your heart, it's been put there for a reason. It's been put there by Creator. You were created for a reason. And so if it's in your heart, you have to trust that it's there for a reason. And you have to trust that, even if it's not exactly what you thought it was going to be, that desire is still there on purpose. And so looking for that validation, also, you're going to need to pick apart, like, is this an ego wounding? Is this something that I'm trying to make up for from something I didn't have in my life? Is this something that, if I get this external validation, then like the years of me not having it, I think will just disappear, because there's always going to be inner work to do. There's always going to be things we're going to have to take responsibility for in ourselves, that, no matter what someone does or doesn't do outside of us, like, it would be ideal if someone did X, Y, and Z thing, and then we could feel totally validated. But sometimes our soul is so advanced that we don't get that affirmation outside of us, so that we can learn to transmute that energy, clear their energy out, and soothe and take care of our own energy enough that we are able to validate ourselves when we don't have any external things just basically helping us to feel like we're doing the right thing. So I know that's annoying. Been there. Okay, so if your ego is going off right now, totally get it. But it's important to remember that when you know what's in your heart and you know what you need to do, that's an important time for you to look for support, and to be, reach out to your networks and be like, I'm going through this hard time, or this is what I think I need to do. And, finding people who will support you as you move forward in the choices that you make is very different than clinging and feeling powerless, of like this validity of, oh my God, if I don't have this one specific thing affirming me and validating me, then like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not good enough. It's not worth it. It's not, whatever. So it's, again, this is a little advanced lesson, a little bit more of an advanced lesson. And there's going to be times in your life where maybe in some areas of your life, it's a little bit easier. You don't have as much wounding, so you can just kind of go more of the support route. And then there's going to be times in your life where the wounding is a little bit more intense. And so maybe you want to lean a little bit more validation. So you might have to go a little bit slower with unpacking it, maybe starting with a therapist, starting with a life coach, starting with, God, start with your journal, start with just talking to yourself about it. But knowing that when you do start that process of working through that validation, it might take, some time to unravel it, and some questions you can ask yourself of, why did I learn? Where did I learn I can't be like this? Is this actually real? Or is this just, one of my limiting beliefs trying to keep me safe? Do I think if I act this way, that I will be protected from something, and just looking all that with mindfulness, not in a way to judge yourself or be mean to yourself or whatever, but just looking at your programming of like, okay, you know, maybe I don't feel comfortable being this way because someone told me if I did, then I wouldn't be enough, or I would be unlovable if I acted this way, or I'm not whatever. So just looking at your own limiting beliefs around that and trying to get to the root of, why do I feel like I cannot have this as my truth when I feel like it's my truth? Versus support is like, hey, I can feel who I am. I can feel the path I want to go on. And so I want people around me to kind of like support me. And this isn't saying like, you know, I want to go spend $8 million and go into debt and like do all this like really reckless stuff, right? That's having support around that would also be like, okay, let's like think about that for a second. So it isn't just like completely, you know, do whatever you want type of thing, but we're talking about for maybe people who are sensitives or who have gone through trauma or who are rewriting their life, or maybe you know, you never felt empowered to live your life in your own way if you grew up in maybe a codependent or a meshed household. So this is just looking at what are the ways that you can validate yourself and what's in your heart from yourself, instead of looking for something external and trying to be like, okay, now like you told me yes, so I'm going to go do it. Because if you rely on that external support once, like it can be a habit, and maybe, you know, you thought someone was going to validate you when they did many times before, and then they don't, and then you're heartbroken. And so of course the sources of validation and support can be different areas of your life. You might need to reach out for different people, but just because someone can support you in the way that you want doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. It just means that like that particular person might not be a good match for you in this type of support that you need in your life. So this is just about, again, validation really coming from inside, coming from being very peaceful, coming from understanding yourself, and then support being a little bit more of, okay, this is the path I want to go on. How can I feel supported around my own growth and my own recovery and my own path that I can feel I want to take regarding this? And again, this doesn't mean that like it's not perfect boxes of one or the other. Okay, that's the point I want to make too. It's not completely one thing or the other. It is just about recognizing, okay, this is something that I maybe need a little more validation and trust in myself for, versus this is the path I want to go on. And so now I want to call in people who are going to support me as this is the choice I'm making. Okay, so, and you can make a list too of like, who in my life do I have right now that validates me, or that I'm expecting to validate me that can't, and then who in my life is actually a wonderful support system for me. And again, anytime you want someone to make a decision for you or do something for you, that's you stepping out of your power, right? So anytime you think, okay, if I just share with this person, they're going to tell me what to do, that's a very clear way you've given them validation over your own life, instead of you kind of tuning in and listening to yourself and hearing what you need to hear. And again, this stuff isn't instant. You might know that like, this is the path you want to be on, or this is the thing you want to do, but it might take you a little bit of time to get there, maybe more than your ego would like. But we need to look at the ways that you are not folding into needing external validation from anything outside of you, and instead trusting what's in your heart and moving forward with that, and trusting that if you have pure intentions, if you've cleaned up your own side of the street, if you've done your own ego work, that is going to definitely bring you to people who will support you through the different decisions you make in your life. Okay, that's all I have for you today. I hope this serves you. If you ever want any more information about me, all that is linked below. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful day.